Good evening. I'm your host on Behind the Trend. Short stories, big insights. Tonight, a seismic shift in one of the most powerful and secretive governments on earth. Iran has a new supreme leader. Not through an election. Not through a revolution. Not through any process that the 88 million citizens of Iran had any say in whatsoever. His name is Mojtaba Khamenei. He is the son of the previous supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who ruled Iran for 35 years. If you are hearing that name for the first time tonight, you are not alone. Mojtaba Khamenei has spent most of his adult life deliberately avoiding the spotlight. No public speeches, no television interviews, no press conferences, no campaign trail. He operated entirely in the shadows, behind closed doors, behind layers of security, behind the enormous machinery of the Islamic Republic. And yet, intelligence agencies, diplomats, and Iran analysts across the world have been watching him for over a decade because they knew long before this moment that this was the plan all along. Tonight we are going to tell you who this man is, how he rose to the most powerful position in Iran, what it means for the Iranian people, and why this story matters to every single person watching, no matter where in the world you are. Let us start with the man himself. Understanding Mojtaba Khamenei requires looking beyond official biographies, which are deliberately thin, and into the network of intelligence assessments, leaked documents, and testimonies from Iranian insiders who have spoken to international media over the years. Mojtaba Khamenei was born in 1969 in the city of Mashhad, Iran's second largest city and one of the holiest sites in Shia Islam. He is the second son of Ali Khamenei, who at that time was a mid-ranking cleric involved in the revolutionary movement that would soon topple the Shah and transform Iran into an Islamic republic. Mojtaba grew up inside the revolution, literally inside it. His childhood was shaped by war, the devastating 8-year conflict with Iraq, by ideology, by the absolute certainty of his family's divine mission. He studied Islamic theology at the seminary in Qom, Iran's religious capital, where he was reportedly a disciplined but unremarkable student. And that word, unremarkable, is important, because the people who knew him in those early years described someone who was quiet, watchful, not charismatic in any traditional sense, not a firebrand preacher, not a military hero, not an intellectual revolutionary. He was something else entirely. He was a strategist. While his peers were competing for public attention, giving sermons, publishing theological papers, positioning themselves for political careers, Mojtaba was building something far more valuable. He was building a network. By his 30s, Western intelligence agencies had identified Mojtaba as one of the most influential figures inside Iran's deep state, despite holding no official government position. He operated through the office of the Supreme Leader, his father's vast administrative apparatus, which controls everything from military appointments to media policy to judicial oversight. He was the gatekeeper. If you wanted access to the Supreme Leader, you went through Mojtaba. If you wanted a military promotion, a government contract, a favorable ruling from the Guardian Council, Mojtaba's approval was essential. He did not need a title. He had something more powerful. He had proximity to the single most powerful person in the country and the trust that comes with blood. To understand Mojtaba's rise, you need to understand how power actually works in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Because it is nothing like what most people imagine. Iran has a president. It has a parliament. It has elections. From the outside, it can look like a functioning democracy with religious characteristics. It is not. The supreme leader sits above every institution, above the president, above the parliament, above the judiciary, above the military. The supreme leader appoints the head of the judiciary. He appoints the commanders of the Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, which is not just a military force, but an economic empire controlling an estimated 40% of Iran's entire economy. He controls the Guardian Council, which decides who is even allowed to run for office in the first place. The president of Iran, the person Western media often focuses on, is in structural terms a mid-level manager. The real power has always been with the supreme leader. And for the past decade, at minimum, much of that real power has been exercised not by Ali Khamenei himself, but by his son. Multiple sources, including former Iranian officials who have defected or fled the country, have described Mojtaba's role in blunt terms. He managed his father's financial empire, estimated by some analysts to be worth tens of billions of dollars, held in a network of religious foundations, state enterprises, and offshore accounts. He oversaw the appointment of key IRGC commanders. He played a central role in the crackdown on the 2009 Green Movement, when millions of Iranians took to the streets to protest a disputed presidential election. That crackdown, which involved mass arrests, torture, and the killing of dozens of protesters, was, according to multiple reports, coordinated significantly through Mojtaba's office. He was not just behind the throne. For many practical purposes, he was the throne. And now, with his father's passing, the curtain has been pulled back. The shadow has stepped into the light. And the man who ran Iran from behind closed doors is now running it openly. The question is, what kind of leader will he be? Let us talk about the succession itself, because this is where the story becomes deeply uncomfortable, even for those who support the Islamic Republic's system of governance. Under Iran's constitution, the supreme leader is selected by the Assembly of Experts, an 88-member body of senior clerics who are theoretically tasked with choosing the most qualified religious and political leader for the role. In theory, this is a deliberative process, a council of wise men evaluating candidates on their scholarship, their piety, their judgment, their fitness to lead. In practice, the Assembly of Experts is itself controlled by the supreme leader. Its members are vetted by the Guardian Council, which the supreme leader appoints. It is, in effect, a closed loop. The leader controls the body that selects the leader. When Ali Khamenei's health began to visibly decline, and reports suggest this process accelerated significantly in recent years, the question of succession became the most sensitive topic in Iranian politics. To discuss it publicly was dangerous. To position yourself as a candidate was potentially fatal. But behind closed doors, the maneuvering was intense. Rival factions within the clergy, the IRGC, and the political establishment all had preferred candidates. Some pushed for a collective leadership model. Others advocated for candidates with stronger religious credentials than Mojtaba. None of them prevailed. What happened, according to analysts and sources inside Iran, is that Mojtaba had spent years systematically placing loyalists in key positions within the IRGC, within the judiciary, within the Assembly of Experts itself. By the time the moment arrived, the outcome was not a deliberation, it was a formality. The son succeeded the father. Not because the people chose him, not because the clerics independently evaluated him as the most qualified, but because he had built, over decades quietly and methodically, a machine that made any other outcome impossible. And for millions of Iranians, particularly the younger generation, who make up the majority of the population, this felt like a door closing. A system that already offered limited political participation had now become, in effect, a hereditary dictatorship wrapped in religious language. The Islamic Republic, born from a revolution against a monarchy, had produced its own dynasty. Let us now turn to what this transition means for ordinary Iranians, because geopolitics is important, but the human story is where the truth lives. Iran is a country in crisis. And that is not an exaggeration. It is a statement supported by every major economic indicator available. Inflation has been running at over 40%. The national currency, the rial, has lost more than 80% of its value over the past decade. Youth unemployment is staggering, with some estimates placing it above 30%. Water shortages, environmental degradation, and crumbling infrastructure affect millions of people every single day. International sanctions, driven primarily by the nuclear dispute and human rights concerns, have strangled the economy. Iranians who have nothing to do with their government's policies are paying the highest price. And then there is the social dimension. In September 2022, a young Kurdish Iranian woman named Mojtaba Khamenei died in the custody of Iran's morality police, arrested for allegedly wearing her hijab improperly. Her death sparked the largest protest in Iran since the 1979 revolution. Under the banner of woman life freedom, millions of Iranians took to the streets demanding fundamental change. The response was brutal. Security forces killed hundreds of protesters. Thousands were arrested. Some were executed after trials that human rights organizations described as fundamentally unfair. Mojtaba Khamenei, according to multiple reports, was directly involved in the decision-making behind that crackdown. He was not a bystander. He was not a moderating voice. He was, by all credible accounts, a hardliner who viewed the protest as an existential threat to the system and responded accordingly. For the millions of Iranians who risk their lives demanding basic freedoms, the elevation of Mojtaba Khamenei is not a transition. It is a continuation. A signal that the system will not reform from within. And yet it would be a mistake to assume that the Iranian people are defeated. Every analyst emphasizes the same point. The gap between the Iranian state and the Iranian people has never been wider. The desire for change has not disappeared. It has gone underground. It is waiting. Now let us zoom out to the global picture. Because what happens inside Iran does not stay inside Iran. It never has. The supreme leader of Iran controls directly or indirectly one of the most significant military and strategic networks in the Middle East, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in the Palestinian territories, Shia militia groups in Iraq and Syria, the Houthi movement in Yemen. These are not independent organizations that happen to share Iran's worldview. They are to varying degrees funded, trained, armed, and strategically directed by Tehran, by the IRGC, and by the Office of the Supreme Leader. The transition of power to Mojtaba Khamenei raises immediate questions in every capital in the region and beyond. First, the nuclear question. Iran's nuclear program has been the defining issue in its relationship with the West for over 20 years. Negotiations have produced agreements that collapse, frameworks that were abandoned, and diplomatic channels that were opened and closed repeatedly. Under Mojtaba, who is assessed as more hardline than his father on security matters, the likelihood of a negotiated nuclear agreement may decrease further. Second, the relationship with Israel. The direct military confrontation between Iran and Israel that escalated dramatically in recent years shows no signs of de-escalation. A new supreme leader seeking to establish authority and credibility may feel pressure to demonstrate strength, not restraint. Third, the relationship with the United States. Washington has cycled between engagement and maximum pressure strategies with Iran for decades. A new supreme leader, particularly one perceived as ideologically rigid, may push American policy further toward confrontation rather than diplomacy. Fourth, and this is often overlooked, the relationship with Russia and China. Iran has deepened its strategic partnerships with both Moscow and Beijing in recent years. Military cooperation with Russia, including the supply of drones used in Ukraine and economic agreements with China, have given Iran alternative power centers to lean on. Under Mojtaba, these relationships are expected to deepen, further accelerating the formation of what some analysts describe as a new axis of resistance to Western-led global order. This is not just a story about one country changing leaders. This is a story about the global balance of power shifting in real time in ways that will be felt for a generation. Before we close tonight, I want to return to something that gets lost in the geopolitics and the analysis. There are 88 million people in Iran. The vast majority of them are young. The median age is 32. They are educated. They are connected to the world through technology despite their government's relentless efforts to restrict it. They have dreams and ambitions that look remarkably similar to those of young people anywhere on earth. They did not choose this leader. They were not asked. And for many of them, this moment does not feel like a transition of power. It feels like a sentence. Whatever our governments think about Iran, whatever policies they pursue, we must never lose sight of the Iranian people. They are not their government. They have made that clear in the streets, at the ballot box when they are allowed to use it, in their art, in their music, in the quiet acts of defiance that happen every single day in a country where defiance can cost you everything. The story of Iran is not finished. It is being written right now by millions of people whose voices the world needs to hear. That is our report for tonight on Behind the Trend. This is a developing story, and we will continue to cover it as events unfold. If this report helped you understand who Mojtaba Khamenei is and why this moment matters, please subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs context, not just headlines. And turn on notifications because when the next chapter breaks, we will be here. Short stories, big insights, that is our promise. I will see you in the next one.